On what should have been the happiest day of my life, I walked into the bridal suite to find my fiancé and my maid of honor in each other's arms, with a signed marriage certificate bearing her name instead of mine. 6 months later, I owned the most successful wedding planning empire in 3 states, and they were both working for me. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. My name is Isabella Rodriguez, and for 28 years I believed that life rewarded those who followed the rules, worked hard, and trusted the people closest to them. Standing in my corner office overlooking downtown Phoenix 6 months ago, wearing my crisp white blazer and reviewing quarterly reports for Morrison & Associates marketing firm, I embodied everything I thought success looked like. The numbers on my computer screen showed another record-breaking quarter, my engagement ring caught the Arizona sunlight perfectly, and my phone buzzed constantly with messages from my best friend Sophia planning our upcoming wedding. That morning felt like the culmination of a carefully orchestrated life plan that had unfolded exactly as intended. At 28, I held the position of senior marketing director at one of Arizona's most prestigious firms, commanded a salary that afforded me a downtown loft with floor-to-ceiling windows, and maintained relationships that seemed as solid as the desert mountains surrounding our city. My daily routine reflected the disciplined approach that had brought me this far. 5:30 a.m. workout sessions, perfectly planned meals, strategic career moves that had advanced me from junior associate to senior director in just 4 years. The comfort of predictability had become my greatest asset and, though I would not understand this until much later, my most dangerous limitation. Every morning, I selected outfits from a wardrobe that projected competence and professionalism. Every evening, I returned home to review wedding planning details with Sophia, who lived in the apartment directly below mine. Every weekend, I spent time with my fiancé James, a successful corporate lawyer who shared my appreciation for structure, ambition, and long-term planning. James Morrison had entered my life 3 years earlier through a professional networking event that perfectly illustrated how our relationship developed along logical, practical lines. We met during a Chamber of Commerce mixer where his law firm was seeking marketing support, and my company specialized in professional services promotion. Our initial conversations centered on business strategy and mutual professional goals. Romance emerged gradually through shared dinners discussing client challenges, weekend activities that included hiking and attending cultural events that expanded our professional networks, and a courtship that progressed through clearly defined stages toward the inevitable proposal. The engagement itself reflected our mutual appreciation for planning and presentation. James arranged the proposal during a weekend trip to Sedona, presenting a carefully selected diamond ring at a scenic overlook that provided the perfect backdrop for photographs we would later use in our wedding announcements. The ring itself represented months of research into cut, clarity, and setting options that would complement my professional wardrobe, while making an appropriate statement about our economic status and future aspirations. Sophia Chen had been my closest friend since graduate school, where we bonded over late-night study sessions, shared career anxieties, and mutual determination to succeed in competitive professional environments. Her background in event planning complemented my marketing expertise, and we frequently collaborated on projects that showcased both our skills. When James proposed, Sophia immediately volunteered to serve as maid of honor and wedding coordinator, insisting that her professional expertise would ensure our special day exceeded every expectation. The wedding planning process had consumed our evenings and weekends for the past 8 months, transforming Sophia's apartment into mission control for what we envisioned as the perfect celebration of love and achievement. Color-coded spreadsheets tracked every detail from floral arrangements to seating charts. Vendor contracts filled multiple binders organized by category and timeline. Guest lists were refined through multiple iterations to ensure the optimal balance of family, friends, and professional connections who would witness our commitment and celebrate our success. My relationship with James embodied the kind of partnership I had always believed would provide both emotional fulfillment and practical advantages. We shared similar values regarding career advancement, financial planning, and lifestyle goals. Our conversations covered professional developments, travel aspirations, and shared interests in hiking, fine dining, and cultural events. Physical intimacy felt comfortable and appropriate rather than passionate, which I interpreted as evidence of mature love that would provide stability over the long term. The months leading up to our wedding date had reinforced my confidence in the choices that brought me to this point. Professional recognition continued through client successes and positive performance reviews. My relationship with James appeared solid and supportive, characterized by mutual respect and shared goals. Sophia's friendship provided both emotional connection and practical assistance as she managed wedding details with the same attention to precision that made her successful in her event planning business. Social validation came from multiple sources as colleagues, family members, and friends expressed admiration for my professional achievements and upcoming marriage. My parents, who had immigrated from Mexico and worked multiple jobs to provide me with educational opportunities, viewed my success as confirmation that their sacrifices had achieved their intended purpose. My younger brother Miguel, still completing his medical residency, often cited my example as inspiration for his own career development. The wedding planning process itself had become a secondary career that showcased organizational skills and attention to detail that impressed everyone involved. Vendors commented on our preparedness and clear communication. Family members marveled at the comprehensive planning that addressed every potential concern or complication. Colleagues at Morrison & Associates joked that if marketing ever lost its appeal, I could transition seamlessly into event planning based on the professional approach I brought to wedding coordination. Financial preparation for both the wedding and married life reflected the same systematic approach that characterized other aspects of my existence. Detailed budgets allocated resources across ceremony, reception, honeymoon, and initial household expenses. Joint financial planning sessions with James established shared goals for home ownership, retirement savings, and future family planning. The prenuptial agreement we signed was presented as a practical protection for assets we had accumulated independently, ensuring that our marriage began on a foundation of transparency and mutual understanding. The guest list represented a carefully curated cross-section of the life I had built. Professional colleagues who could provide career networking opportunities. Family members whose presence honored the support system that made my success possible. College and graduate school friends who had witnessed my academic and early career development. The invitation design, venue selection, and menu planning reflected personal taste, while also making statements about sophistication and attention to quality that would reinforce positive impressions of both James and me. 3 weeks before the wedding date, every detail appeared to be progressing flawlessly. The final dress fitting confirmed that my custom-designed gown created exactly the elegant silhouette I had envisioned. Floral arrangements were finalized with the florist who specialized in upscale celebrations. The photographer had conducted engagement sessions that produced images we were already incorporating into thank you cards and wedding announcements. RSVPs indicated attendance levels that would fill our chosen venue without exceeding capacity. My professional responsibilities at Morrison & Associates continued without interruption, despite the considerable time investment required for wedding planning. Client projects proceeded successfully through careful time management and delegation strategies. Performance metrics remained strong across all measurements that determined annual reviews and advancement opportunities. The balance between personal and professional commitments reinforced my confidence in the organizational skills that had brought me this far. Sophia's involvement in every aspect of wedding planning had deepened our friendship while also providing professional validation of her event coordination capabilities. Her attention to detail matched my own perfectionist tendencies. Her creative suggestions enhanced elements I might have approached too conservatively. Her enthusiasm for the entire process made planning sessions feel more like collaborative creative projects than tedious administrative tasks. The bachelor and bachelorette parties, held the weekend before the wedding, had proceeded without incident or concern. James spent his evening with college friends and law firm colleagues at a golf resort outside Scottsdale, returning home the following day with positive reports about the celebration and expressions of readiness for married life. My bachelorette weekend with Sophia and 4 other close friends included spa treatments, fine dining, and entertainment that felt appropriately celebratory without crossing boundaries that might create complications or regrets. Tuesday morning, 4 days before the wedding, I remember standing in my office reviewing final timeline details with Sophia during her lunch break visit. The event schedule was printed on heavy cardstock and distributed to all wedding party members. Transportation arrangements were confirmed with the limousine service. Hotel accommodations for out-of-town guests were verified, and welcome bags were assembled with local treats and celebration schedules. Every contingency plan had been developed and communicated to relevant parties. The conversation with Sophia that day focused on final preparations and her excitement about coordinating an event that would showcase her professional capabilities while celebrating a milestone in our friendship. Her enthusiasm seemed genuine and appropriate as she discussed flower deliveries, photographer schedules, and reception timeline management. Nothing in her demeanor suggested the deception that was already unfolding behind my carefully planned life. Wednesday evening, the night before our wedding, I attended the rehearsal dinner with confidence that every element of our celebration would proceed exactly as intended. The venue looked perfect, with centerpieces that complemented the color scheme, while providing conversation-friendly arrangements. The restaurant staff demonstrated competence and professionalism that assured me the reception would meet our quality expectations. Family members and friends who had traveled for our celebration expressed enthusiasm and appreciation for the attention to detail that characterized every aspect of our planning. James appeared relaxed and confident during the rehearsal process, moving through ceremony positions with the same composed demeanor he brought to professional presentations. His interactions with family members were appropriate and warm. His comments about the following day expressed anticipation rather than anxiety. Nothing in his behavior suggested anything other than genuine commitment to the marriage we were about to begin. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. That evening, I returned to my apartment with the satisfied exhaustion that comes from completing complex project preparation successfully. The wedding dress hung in my bedroom closet, protected by covering that would preserve its pristine condition until the following morning. Wedding day emergency kit contained everything from safety pins to pain relievers to address any minor complications that might arise. Timeline checklists were reviewed one final time before I allowed myself to sleep, confident that the following day would unfold as the perfect culmination of months of careful planning. The comfort of that final evening before my wedding represented the peak of confidence in choices that had shaped my adult life. Professional success, personal relationships, and future planning aligned in ways that seemed to validate every decision I had made since graduate school. The predictability that had characterized my approach to career development and relationship building felt like evidence of wisdom rather than limitation. Control over circumstances and outcomes had become so familiar that I could not imagine scenarios where such control might prove insufficient or ultimately meaningless. Sleep came easily that night, undisturbed by premonitions or concerns about the day ahead. The last thought I remember before unconsciousness was gratitude for the life I had built and anticipation for the celebration that would mark the beginning of its next phase. The morning would bring revelations that would shatter every assumption I held about control, predictability, and the people closest to me, but in those final hours of ignorance, comfort and confidence reigned supreme. The morning of my wedding day arrived with the kind of pristine Arizona sunshine that wedding planners pray for, yet something felt subtly different from the moment I opened my eyes. Perhaps it was the unusual silence from Sophia's apartment below mine, where I expected to hear her bustling about with final preparations. Perhaps it was the way the light seemed too bright, too sharp, casting shadows that appeared darker than they should have been. The feeling resembled walking into a familiar room where someone had moved the furniture just slightly, creating an atmosphere of wrongness that the conscious mind could not immediately identify. My first indication that this day would deviate from our meticulously planned timeline came when Sophia failed to arrive at the scheduled 7 a.m. appointment for hair and makeup preparation. We had confirmed this timing 3 times during the previous week, and Sophia's reliability in professional contexts had never wavered throughout our friendship. Her event planning business had built its reputation on precise execution and attention to schedule adherence. The absence felt particularly unusual because she had insisted on arriving early to review final details and address any last-minute adjustments that might be required. By 7:15 a.m., I found myself calling her cell phone repeatedly, each attempt reaching voicemail immediately, as if the device had been powered off or placed in airplane mode. The greeting I heard was her standard professional message, cheerful and efficient, promising to return calls within 4 hours during business operations. For someone coordinating a wedding that would begin in 6 hours, this communication gap represented more than minor inconvenience. It suggested either a significant emergency or an abandonment of responsibility that seemed entirely out of character. The makeup artist, Patricia Morales, arrived precisely on schedule and immediately noticed Sophia's absence. Patricia had worked with Sophia on multiple previous events and commented that such tardiness was unprecedented in their professional relationship. Her concerns seemed genuine rather than merely polite, and she offered to contact other members of the bridal party to determine whether anyone had heard from Sophia since the previous evening. The fact that a vendor who worked regularly with my best friend found her absence alarming validated my growing anxiety about the situation. My mother, who had planned to arrive at 8 a.m. for the traditional blessing and photograph session, appeared at my apartment door 30 minutes early with an expression of concern that immediately heightened my own nervousness. She explained that she had received a call from my Aunt Carmen, who was staying at the same hotel as several out-of-town wedding guests. According to Carmen, there had been some kind of disturbance in the hotel corridor during the early morning hours, involving raised voices and door slamming that had awakened multiple guests. The details were unclear, but Carmen mentioned hearing what sounded like James's voice among those involved in the commotion. The weight of these accumulated irregularities began pressing against the confidence I had maintained throughout months of wedding planning. Each individual incident could be explained by reasonable circumstances. Sophia might have experienced a family emergency that prevented normal communication. The hotel disturbance might have involved guests who were not connected to our wedding party. James might have been helping to resolve a problem, rather than creating one. Yet the combination of these deviations from expected patterns created an undercurrent of anxiety that no rational explanation could completely dispel. Patricia proceeded with hair and makeup preparation despite Sophia's absence, but the conversation inevitably centered on the missing maid of honor and the implications for the day's schedule. As my transformation progressed through careful application of cosmetics and intricate hairstyling, I found myself studying my reflection for reassurance that everything remained under control. The woman in the mirror appeared composed and radiant, exactly as a bride should look on her wedding day. Yet behind the carefully applied makeup, my eyes reflected a tension that cosmetics could not conceal. This second significant warning sign emerged when James failed to respond to my traditional good morning text message, which we had exchanged every day for the past 3 years without exception. Our established pattern involved brief but affectionate messages that confirmed our mutual anticipation for each day's activities and maintained connection even during busy periods. The absence of his usual response felt particularly strange given the significance of this specific morning and our previous discussions about the excitement we both felt regarding our wedding day. My attempts to contact James directly resulted in the same immediate voicemail redirection that I had experienced with Sophia's phone. The pattern was too similar to be coincidental, suggesting either a widespread technical problem with cellular service or a deliberate decision by both individuals to avoid communication during this critical period. Neither explanation provided comfort, particularly when combined with the other irregularities that were beginning to accumulate. The photographer, Marcus Rivera, arrived at 9 a.m. as scheduled and immediately began documenting the preparation process with the same professional enthusiasm he had demonstrated during our engagement photo session. However, his attempts to capture traditional getting-ready photographs that included the maid of honor required creative adjustments to account for Sophia's continued absence. Marcus suggested that we could add those specific shots later in the day if Sophia appeared, but the omission created visible gaps in the standard wedding day narrative that we had planned to document. My mother's increasing concern became apparent through her repeated attempts to contact various family members and wedding party participants for information about the morning's unusual developments. Her phone conversations, conducted in rapid Spanish that she used when anxiety heightened her emotions, revealed that several people had noticed irregularities, but no one possessed complete information about what was occurring. The fragmented reports painted a picture of disruption without clarity about causes or solutions. The third unmistakable warning sign appeared when the limousine service called to confirm pickup times and locations for the wedding party transportation. The driver mentioned that he had received conflicting information about passenger counts and destination timing. According to his records, Someone identifying themselves as the maid of honor had called the previous evening to modify arrangements, reducing the number of passengers and requesting an earlier departure time for certain members of the wedding party. These changes had not been discussed with me, and they contradicted the carefully planned logistics that we had finalized weeks earlier. The realization that someone was making unauthorized modifications to wedding day arrangements without consulting me triggered a level of alarm that I could no longer dismiss as pre-wedding nerves or minor scheduling complications. The pattern of communication blackouts, missing key participants, and secretive changes to established plans suggested deliberate deception rather than innocent misunderstandings or emergency situations. The foundation of trust upon which I had built my sense of security for this day was beginning to show cracks that threatened the entire structure. My bridesmaid Jennifer Martinez arrived at 10 a.m. and immediately sensed the tension that had been building throughout the morning. Jennifer had known both Sophia and me since graduate school, and her observations about the situation carried weight because of her intimate familiarity with our friendship dynamics. She confirmed that Sophia's behavior during recent weeks had included subtle changes that, in retrospect, seemed significant. Sophia had been less available for casual conversations, more focused on wedding logistics than personal connection, and occasionally evasive when asked about her own romantic relationships or future plans. The pattern Jennifer described resonated with my own recent observations about changes in Sophia's typical behavior. Our conversations had become more task-focused and less emotionally intimate over the past month. Her enthusiasm for wedding planning had remained high, but her interest in discussing the emotional significance of marriage or my feelings about the life changes ahead had diminished noticeably. These shifts had seemed minor at the time, explained by the professional demands of coordinating a complex event, but they now appeared potentially meaningful in ways I had not previously considered. Jennifer's presence provided both comfort and additional perspective on the morning's developments. Her calm demeanor helped counterbalance my growing anxiety, while her practical approach to problem-solving offered concrete steps for addressing immediate concerns. She volunteered to drive to Sophia's apartment to check on her physical welfare, while also gathering information that might explain the communication blackout. This plan provided actionable steps that felt more productive than continued speculation about possible explanations. The fourth warning sign emerged when Jennifer returned from Sophia's apartment with disturbing news about what she had discovered there. Sophia's car was not in its assigned parking space, and her apartment appeared unoccupied based on the absence of lights, sounds, or any response to persistent doorbell ringing and phone calls. The apartment manager, when contacted, confirmed that Sophia had not been seen since the previous afternoon, and that she had made no arrangements for extended absence that would explain her current unavailability. More troubling was Jennifer's report that Sophia's mailbox contained a piece of certified mail that had been delivered the previous day, but remained unclaimed. The return address indicated legal correspondence from a law firm that specialized in family and matrimonial matters. While the specific contents remained unknown, the timing and nature of this delivery suggested potential complications in Sophia's personal life that might explain her sudden disappearance during such a critical period. The accumulation of these warning signs created a level of concern that could no longer be managed through optimistic speculation or determined focus on wedding day preparations. The pattern of missing participants, unauthorized changes to arrangements, communication blackouts, and mysterious legal correspondence pointed toward deliberate deception rather than unfortunate coincidence. The sense of control that had characterized my approach to wedding planning was being systematically undermined by forces that I could not identify or address through normal problem-solving methods. My mother's attempts to reach James through alternative channels had proven equally unsuccessful, creating a parallel pattern of unavailability that seemed too coordinated to be accidental. Her conversations with James's family members revealed that they had not heard from him since the previous evening, and that they were becoming concerned about his failure to respond to their congratulatory messages and final coordination requests. The universal nature of this communication blackout suggested intentional avoidance rather than technical problems or emergency situations. The morning's developments had transformed what should have been joyful preparation time into an exercise in crisis management and damage control. Each attempt to resolve one concern revealed additional complications that deepened the overall sense of unease about the day's prospects. The careful planning that had provided security and confidence throughout the engagement period now felt inadequate to address problems that lay outside the scope of traditional wedding day contingencies. Patricia completed the hair and makeup preparation with professional skill that created the visual appearance of bridal perfection, despite the growing chaos surrounding the day's logistics. The reflection in the mirror showed a woman who looked ready for her wedding, but the eyes staring back revealed anxiety and confusion that cosmetics could not disguise. The contrast between external presentation and internal turmoil captured the broader disconnect between expectations and reality that was beginning to define this day. The final warning sign of this phase came when the florist called to report complications with delivery arrangements that seemed to echo the pattern of unauthorized changes affecting other vendors. Someone claiming to represent the wedding party had contacted the florist to request modifications to bouquet designs and delivery locations that contradicted our original specifications. These changes included alterations to floral arrangements that seemed designed to accommodate a different number of participants than we had planned for throughout months of preparation. The systematic nature of these modifications suggested coordination and planning, rather than spontaneous decision-making or emergency responses. The realization that multiple aspects of the wedding were being altered without my knowledge or consent represented a fundamental violation of trust that extended beyond simple miscommunication or logistical confusion. Someone with detailed knowledge of our plans was actively working to change them in ways that seemed designed to exclude me from my own wedding day. Standing in my apartment at 11 a.m. on what should have been the happiest day of my life, surrounded by the beautiful preparation work that had been completed despite the morning's challenges, I faced the undeniable conclusion that the day would not proceed according to our carefully laid plans. The warning signs had accumulated beyond the point where optimism or determination could overcome the evident problems that were unfolding around me. The drive to the church would reveal the full scope of the deception that had been building throughout these morning hours, but the foundation for that devastating discovery had been laid through these seemingly minor irregularities that had steadily undermined my confidence in the day's prospects. The comfort and control that had characterized my adult life were about to be shattered completely, but the strength and resilience that would eventually carry me through the crisis ahead were already beginning to emerge through my responses to these initial challenges. The warning signs had served their purpose, preparing me psychologically for revelations that would have been even more devastating if they had arrived without any advance notice. The morning's difficulties had begun the process of separating my sense of self-worth from external circumstances and other people's choices, a lesson that would prove essential for the transformation that lay ahead. The drive to St. Catherine's Cathedral through downtown Phoenix should have been a moment of triumph, the culmination of months of preparation as I traveled toward the altar where my new life would begin. Instead, I found myself constructing increasingly elaborate explanations for the morning's irregularities, my mind working overtime to preserve the narrative I had spent years building about my relationship with James and my friendship with Sophia. The human capacity for self-deception reveals itself most powerfully when faced with evidence that threatens to destroy everything we believe about our closest relationships and our own judgment. Sitting in the back seat of the limousine that had been modified to accommodate fewer passengers than originally planned, I began crafting stories that could explain away each warning sign from the morning. Sophia must have experienced a family emergency so urgent that normal communication protocols became impossible. James had likely been called away to handle a legal crisis for a major client, the kind of professional obligation that demanded complete focus and justified temporary unavailability. The unauthorized changes to wedding arrangements could be attributed to well-meaning relatives who thought they were helping with last-minute coordination. Each explanation required increasingly creative interpretation of facts that were becoming difficult to ignore. The synchronized communication blackouts from both Sophia and James suggested coordination rather than coincidence. But I convinced myself that they might have been working together to resolve some surprise element they had planned for the ceremony. The legal correspondence in Sophia's mailbox could relate to her business operations or family matters that had nothing to do with my wedding. The hotel disturbance might have involved guests who shared similar names or room locations, creating confusion in the reports I had received. My mother, sitting beside me in the limousine, demonstrated her own version of denial by focusing intensively on minor details that could still be controlled and perfected. She adjusted my veil repeatedly, checking for wrinkles that existed only in her imagination. She reviewed the ceremony program for the 15th time, as if memorizing the sequence of events could somehow guarantee their successful execution. Her nervous energy reflected the same desperate need to maintain control over circumstances that were increasingly beyond anyone's management. The photographer continued documenting our journey to the cathedral, capturing images that would later serve as evidence of the last moments when denial remained possible. In those photographs, I appear composed and radiant, every inch the confident bride who had planned her perfect day down to the smallest detail. The camera could not capture the internal dialogue that was working frantically to reconcile observable facts with preferred beliefs, or the growing tension between rational analysis and emotional investment in maintaining existing assumptions. Upon arrival at St. Catherine's, the first crack in my carefully constructed denial came through the reaction of Father Martinez, who had officiated our engagement ceremony and counseled us through months of marriage preparation. His expression when he greeted me revealed concern rather than the joy appropriate for a wedding day encounter. His gentle inquiry about whether we needed to discuss any last-minute concerns carried undertones that suggested he possessed information I had not yet received. Father Martinez explained that he had been contacted earlier that morning by someone claiming to represent our wedding party, requesting modifications to the ceremony that seemed unusual given our previous discussions. The caller had asked about procedures for substituting participants in the wedding party, and had inquired about legal requirements for witnesses to marriage ceremonies. These questions implied changes to our planned ceremony that I had not authorized and could not understand within the context of normal wedding day adjustments. The second major challenge to my denial emerged when I encountered James's family members in the cathedral's preparation areas. Their expressions reflected confusion and concern rather than celebration, and their questions revealed that they possessed even less information about the morning's developments than I did. James's mother, Patricia Morrison, approached me with obvious anxiety about her son's absence and her inability to contact him despite repeated attempts throughout the morning. Patricia's description of her last conversation with James, which had occurred the previous evening, included details that contradicted my understanding of his activities and mindset. According to her account, James had seemed agitated and distracted during their phone call, mentioning unspecified complications that required resolution before the wedding could proceed. He had asked unusual questions about family expectations regarding marriage, and had made cryptic references to decisions that needed to be made in the best interests of everyone involved. The third assault on my denial came through observations about the physical setup of the ceremony space, which had been modified in ways that accommodated different arrangements than we had rehearsed. The altar area had been reconfigured to suggest a smaller wedding party, and certain decorative elements had been repositioned in ways that seemed designed for different photographic angles or participant positioning. These changes implied advanced knowledge of alterations to our ceremony that I had not approved or even discussed. My bridesmaid Jennifer, who had remained by my side throughout these discoveries, began voicing concerns that I was still unwilling to acknowledge directly. Her observations about the pattern of changes and communications suggested deliberate planning rather than emergency responses or coincidental complications. Her questions about whether I had noticed changes in James's behavior during recent weeks forced me to confront memories I had been suppressing or reinterpreting through optimistic assumptions. The fourth challenge to my denial arrived when the wedding coordinator employed by the cathedral, Maria Santos, approached me with questions about timing and participant arrangements that revealed additional unauthorized modifications to our ceremony plans. Someone claiming authority to speak for our wedding party had contacted Maria to discuss changes to processional order, seating arrangements, and post-ceremony logistics that seemed designed to accommodate different participants than those we had planned for throughout our engagement. Maria's professional experience with wedding ceremonies enabled her to recognize patterns that suggested complexity beyond normal last-minute adjustments. Her tactful inquiries about whether we were dealing with family conflicts or participant substitutions reflected her awareness that the changes she had been asked to implement were unusual in both scope and timing. Her offers to provide additional support or modify arrangements further suggested that she anticipated complications that might require professional intervention. The accumulation of these observations began overwhelming the explanatory frameworks I had constructed to maintain my denial. The coordinated nature of the changes, the timing of the communications, and the consistency of the modifications across multiple vendors and participants suggested planning and intention rather than emergency responses or coincidental difficulties. The foundation of trust upon which my relationship assumptions were built was beginning to crumble under the weight of evidence that could no longer be ignored or explained away. My attempts to contact James directly became increasingly desperate as the ceremony start time approached. Each call that went immediately to voicemail reinforced the growing certainty that his absence was deliberate rather than accidental. The messages I left progressed from cheerful assumption that minor delays were causing communication difficulties to increasingly direct requests for immediate contact to discuss urgent concerns about the day's proceedings. The emotional cost of maintaining denial in the face of mounting evidence began manifesting through physical symptoms that I could no longer attribute to normal pre-wedding nervousness. My hands trembled despite conscious efforts to remain calm. My breathing became shallow and rapid, creating lightheadedness that required deliberate management. The carefully applied makeup began showing signs of perspiration and stress that threatened to undermine the perfect bridal appearance that had taken hours to create. Jennifer's suggestion that we postpone the ceremony until we could locate James and Sophia represented the first direct challenge to my assumption that the day would somehow proceed according to our original plans. Her practical approach to problem-solving included contingency options for addressing the current crisis, but implementing any of those options required acknowledging that a crisis actually existed. The possibility of postponement forced me to confront the reality that my perfect wedding day might not happen as planned, or might not happen at all. The fifth and most devastating challenge to my denial came when Father Martinez gently suggested that we needed to have a direct conversation about the situation that was unfolding. His pastoral experience had provided him with insight into relationship crises that enabled him to recognize patterns that suggested deeper problems than logistical complications. His offer to facilitate difficult conversations or provide counseling support implied that he understood the morning's developments as symptoms of more fundamental issues. Father Martinez's questions about my relationship with James became increasingly pointed as he attempted to determine whether the current crisis reflected temporary complications or more serious problems that required different types of intervention. His inquiries about recent changes in communication patterns, shared decision-making processes, and mutual commitment to marriage preparation revealed his suspicion that the morning's events might represent culmination rather than aberration in relationship difficulties. The realization that a respected religious authority figure was questioning the viability of my marriage created cognitive dissonance that my denial mechanisms could no longer manage effectively. Father Martinez's concerns carried weight because of his professional experience with relationship counseling and his personal knowledge of our engagement process. His gentle but persistent questions forced me to acknowledge inconsistencies in my relationship narrative that I had been minimizing or ignoring for weeks. My mother's increasing agitation reflected her own struggle with denial as evidence mounted that the day would not proceed as planned. Her attempts to maintain optimism through focus on controllable details became less effective as the scope of the problems became more apparent. Her questions about backup plans and alternative arrangements revealed her growing acceptance that traditional solutions might not be adequate for addressing the current situation. The final moments of my denial phase occurred when I was forced to acknowledge that James and Sophia had been absent for too long, with too little explanation, for their behavior to be attributed to normal complications or emergency situations. The pattern of coordinated absence, unauthorized changes to arrangements, and mysterious communications suggested intentional deception rather than unfortunate circumstances. The trust that had formed the foundation of my most important relationships was beginning to collapse under the weight of evidence that could no longer be rationalized away. Standing in the cathedral preparation room, surrounded by the physical evidence of months of wedding planning, wearing a dress that represented significant financial and emotional investment, I faced the moment when denial was no longer psychologically sustainable. The elaborate explanations I had constructed throughout the morning were crumbling under the accumulated weight of facts that demanded different interpretations. The comfortable assumptions about my relationships and my judgment were about to be shattered completely. The transition from denial to acceptance would prove to be one of the most difficult psychological processes I had ever experienced. But it would also mark the beginning of a journey toward self-knowledge and empowerment that would ultimately transform my entire life. The moment when denial became impossible was also the moment when genuine growth became possible, though I would not understand this truth until much later in my recovery process. The drive from denial to devastation would be swift and brutal, but it would also clear away illusions that had been limiting my potential and preventing me from recognizing my own strength and capability. The end of denial marked the beginning of a journey toward authenticity and empowerment that would exceed anything I had imagined possible, while living within the comfortable limitations of my previous assumptions about relationships, trust, and personal worth. The cathedral's bridal suite door opened with the soft whisper that would forever divide my life into before and after. I had come seeking Sophia, hoping that finding her would restore some sense of normalcy to a day that had already deviated far from our carefully orchestrated plans. The room beyond that threshold contained the complete destruction of everything I believed about the people closest to me, and the life I had constructed through years of disciplined effort and unwavering trust. Sophia stood near the ornate mirror that brides traditionally used for final preparations, but she was not wearing the soft lavender bridesmaid dress we had selected together months earlier. Instead, she wore my backup wedding gown, the elegant ivory creation I had kept in reserve according to wedding planning advice about contingency preparations. The dress fit her perfectly, as if alterations had been made specifically for her measurements, suggesting planning that extended far beyond spontaneous decision-making. James sat in the upholstered chair positioned beside the window, no longer wearing the charcoal gray tuxedo we had chosen to complement my dress and the overall aesthetic of our ceremony. He had changed into a midnight blue suit that I had never seen before, one that coordinated beautifully with Sophia's transformed appearance and created the visual harmony that professional wedding photographers seek when documenting couples' most important moments. Between them on the antique table sat a marriage certificate, the official document that would legally bind two people in matrimony within the state of Arizona. The certificate bore today's date and the location of St. Catherine's Cathedral, but the names inscribed in flowing calligraphy were not Isabella Rodriguez and James Morrison. Instead, the document identified the marrying parties as Sophia Chen and James Morrison, with signatures already applied in the spaces designated for bride, groom, and officiating minister. The scene before me represented such a complete inversion of expected reality that my mind struggled to process the visual information it was receiving. The cognitive dissonance between what I was seeing and what should have been occurring in this space at this time created a moment of psychological suspension, where rational thought temporarily ceased to function. Time seemed to slow, while my consciousness attempted to reconcile the impossible with the undeniably real. Sophia turned toward me with an expression that combined guilt, defiance, and something resembling relief. Her transformation from supportive best friend to radiant bride was complete in every detail, from the professionally styled hair adorned with pearls from my family heirloom collection to the makeup application that enhanced her natural beauty while creating the luminous glow traditionally associated with wedding day photography. She appeared more beautiful than I had ever seen her, as if deception had liberated her from constraints that had previously limited her full expression. James stood slowly, his movement deliberate rather than startled, suggesting that my arrival was not unexpected. His expression revealed neither surprise nor shame, but rather a resignation that implied he had been preparing for this confrontation throughout the morning's elaborate deception. The man I had planned to marry in less than 2 hours looked at me with the detached compassion typically reserved for delivering difficult news to someone who would inevitably be hurt by necessary truths. The first words spoken in that transformed bridal suite came from Sophia, whose voice carried a steadiness that contradicted the magnitude of what she was revealing. She explained that she and James had been conducting a romantic relationship for the past 4 months, beginning during a business dinner where they had discovered compatibility that extended far beyond professional collaboration. Their connection had developed through shared interests, intellectual stimulation, and emotional intimacy that had evolved naturally into love. The timeline Sophia provided recontextualized numerous interactions and events from recent months that I had interpreted through the lens of friendship and wedding planning collaboration. The extended conversations between James and Sophia about venue selection and vendor coordination had actually been opportunities for private communication about their developing relationship. The shopping trips for wedding attire had included selections for Sophia's use rather than solely for bridesmaid preparation. The detailed discussions about ceremony logistics had facilitated planning for their own wedding rather than assisting with mine. James's contribution to this revelation focused on his growing realization that his engagement to me had been based on practical compatibility rather than passionate love. He described our relationship as fundamentally sound, but lacking the emotional intensity and intellectual stimulation he had discovered in his connection with Sophia. His decision to proceed with marriage to me had been motivated by respect for our shared history and concern about disappointing family members and professional associates who expected our union to proceed as planned. The transformation of his understanding had occurred gradually over the 4 months of his relationship with Sophia, as he experienced emotional and intellectual connection that had been absent from our 3-year engagement. The comparison between relationships had revealed deficiencies in our partnership that he had been unwilling to acknowledge until the alternative became undeniably superior. His commitment to honesty, even when such honesty would cause significant pain, had ultimately compelled him to act on his genuine feelings, rather than maintaining a marriage founded on inadequate emotional connection. The signed marriage certificate represented the culmination of weeks of legal and logistical planning that had proceeded parallel to our wedding preparations. James had consulted with attorneys about the legal requirements for dissolving our engagement without significant financial penalty, while simultaneously arranging for a private ceremony that would unite him with Sophia. The coordination with cathedral staff had been accomplished through discreet communication that avoided detection while ensuring that all necessary elements would be in place for their surprise wedding. Sophia's explanation of her role in this deception revealed planning and execution skills that I had admired in her professional work but had never imagined would be directed toward betraying our friendship. She had researched legal requirements for witness substitution, coordinated with vendors to modify arrangements without my knowledge, and managed communication with family members to minimize suspicion about changed plans. Her expertise in event planning had been applied to orchestrating her own wedding while maintaining the illusion that she was assisting with mine. The emotional impact of these revelations was complicated by the professional competence with which they had been executed. The betrayal was not the result of impulsive passion or temporary poor judgment, but rather a carefully planned operation that had required months of systematic deception. The level of organization and attention to detail that had characterized their conspiracy demonstrated intellectual capabilities and strategic thinking that I was forced to acknowledge even while experiencing profound personal devastation. The discovery that Father Martinez had been contacted about performing an alternative ceremony explained his earlier questions about participant substitutions and legal requirements. The religious authority who had counseled James and me through engagement preparation had been approached about officiating a different wedding entirely, creating an ethical dilemma that he had attempted to navigate through careful inquiry about my awareness of and consent to the changed arrangements. The cathedral staff modifications that had puzzled me throughout the morning were revealed as preparations for Sophia and James's ceremony, which would utilize the same venue, decorations, and basic arrangements that had been planned for my wedding. The efficiency of this approach minimized both financial cost and logistical complexity, while ensuring that their celebration would benefit from months of careful planning and preparation that I had invested in what I believed was my own special day. The most devastating aspect of this revelation was the realization that every person I had trusted most completely had been actively working to deceive me for months. Sophia had leveraged our friendship to gain access to personal information and wedding plans that she then used to facilitate her own romantic relationship with my fiancé. James had maintained our engagement as a cover story, while developing an alternative relationship that he ultimately chose to formalize through marriage. The systematic nature of their deception extended to emotional manipulation that had kept me unaware of the deteriorating foundation of my most important relationships. Sophia had continued providing friendship and support while secretly undermining the relationship she appeared to be helping me protect and develop. James had maintained physical and emotional intimacy with me while directing his genuine romantic energy toward another person entirely. The wedding guests who had traveled to witness my marriage would instead observe the union of my best friend and former fiancé, a substitution that had been planned and executed without my knowledge or consent. The financial investment I had made in creating a perfect celebration would benefit a couple who had betrayed me, while accepting my resources and emotional support. The emotional significance I had attached to this day would be transferred to people who had systematically deceived me while pretending to care about my happiness and well-being. Standing in that bridal suite, wearing a wedding dress that would never fulfill its intended purpose, surrounded by evidence of months of careful planning that had been directed toward my exclusion rather than my celebration, I experienced the complete collapse of the identity and future I had constructed over years of dedicated effort. The comfortable assumptions about trust, friendship, and romantic love that had anchored my adult life were revealed as naive misconceptions that had made me vulnerable to exploitation by the people closest to me. The immediate aftermath of this discovery was characterized by a psychological numbness that protected me from the full emotional impact of what I was experiencing. The magnitude of the betrayal was too large for immediate processing, creating a temporary state of suspended reaction that allowed me to function despite the destruction of everything I had believed about my closest relationships and my own judgment in maintaining them. Sophia's final statement in that room was an expression of hope that I would eventually understand their decision, and perhaps even feel gratitude that they had prevented me from entering a marriage that lacked the genuine love and compatibility they had discovered together. Her suggestion that I had been saved from a mistake I was too invested to recognize revealed a complete misunderstanding of the violation she had committed against both friendship and basic human decency. James's parting words focused on practical arrangements for managing the immediate aftermath of their revelation, including his assumption of responsibility for informing wedding guests about the changed circumstances and his offer to handle financial obligations related to canceled arrangements. His business-like approach to managing the crisis he had created reflected the same detached competence that had enabled him to maintain our engagement while developing an alternative relationship. The door closing behind them marked the end of the life I had built, and the beginning of a journey toward discovering capabilities and strength I had never been forced to develop while operating within the comfortable security of trusted relationships. The catalyst event that destroyed my existing reality also created space for transformation that would exceed anything I could have achieved, while remaining within the limitations of my previous assumptions about love, friendship, and personal worth. The empty bridal suite became the birthplace of a new version of Isabella Rodriguez, one who would be forged through adversity rather than shaped by comfort, and who would discover that the most devastating betrayals often serve as gateways to the most extraordinary personal evolution. The cathedral corridor stretched endlessly before me as I emerged from the bridal suite, each step echoing through halls that had witnessed countless celebrations but few devastations of this magnitude. The ivory wedding dress that had represented hope and new beginnings now felt like costume armor protecting me from the full impact of reality, while I navigated the immediate practical challenges of informing 200 guests that the bride they had come to celebrate had been replaced without her knowledge or consent. The psychological numbness that had protected me during the initial discovery began fragmenting as the scope of necessary actions became apparent. Wedding guests had traveled across multiple states to witness what they believed would be my marriage to James Morrison. Family members had invested emotional energy and financial resources in supporting what they understood to be my most important life milestone. Professional colleagues had cleared schedules and made arrangements to attend what they expected would be a networking opportunity disguised as a joyful celebration. Father Martinez approached me with the careful demeanor of someone experienced in managing family crises that erupted during what should have been sacred celebrations. His pastoral training had prepared him for situations where personal conflicts threatened to disrupt religious ceremonies, but the complete substitution of bride and groom represented unprecedented complexity that required immediate decisions about how to proceed with dignity and minimal additional harm to all parties involved. The first practical decision required determining whether to inform guests about the changed circumstances before Sophia and James proceeded with their ceremony, or to allow their wedding to occur while I managed the aftermath privately. Father Martinez explained that both options carried significant emotional and social consequences that needed careful consideration. Immediate disclosure would create public drama that might overshadow their celebration, while delayed revelation would leave guests feeling deceived about the event they had been invited to witness. My mother appeared in the corridor, her expression shifting from concern to horror as she processed the situation through rapid Spanish conversation with Father Martinez. Her emotional reaction encompassed not only personal devastation about my circumstances, but also cultural mortification about the social implications of canceled wedding celebrations, and the gossip that would inevitably follow such unprecedented events within our extended family and community networks. The second critical decision involved managing the financial obligations associated with canceled wedding arrangements, while simultaneously addressing the immediate emotional needs of family members who were beginning to understand that the day would not proceed according to their expectations. The venue rental, catering services, photography packages, and transportation arrangements represented significant investments that could not be easily canceled or transferred without substantial financial penalties. Jennifer Martinez arrived to provide support and practical assistance with managing immediate logistics while I processed the emotional impact of the betrayal. Her presence offered both familiar comfort and professional perspective on crisis management strategies that could minimize additional damage while preserving whatever dignity remained salvageable from the situation. Her questions about immediate priorities forced me to engage with concrete decision-making, rather than becoming paralyzed by the magnitude of what had occurred. The telephone calls that followed represented the most difficult communication challenges I had ever faced. Explaining to relatives who had traveled significant distances that the wedding was canceled required developing language that conveyed essential information without providing details that would create additional complications or embarrassment. Each conversation demanded emotional energy that felt increasingly scarce, while simultaneously requiring diplomatic skills I had never been forced to develop. My father's reaction, conveyed through telephone conversation because his work schedule had prevented earlier arrival, reflected the particular devastation that parents experience when their children suffer public humiliation and personal betrayal. His immediate offer to drive from Tucson to provide support demonstrated the protective instincts that activate when family members face crises that threaten both emotional well-being and social standing within community networks that extend across generations. The third major practical challenge involved managing professional relationships and career implications that might result from the public nature of the wedding cancellation. Several Morrison and Associates colleagues were among the invited guests, and their awareness of my personal crisis could potentially affect workplace dynamics and advancement opportunities in ways that required careful consideration and strategic management to minimize long-term professional damage. The photographers and videographers who had been contracted to document my wedding day faced ethical and professional dilemmas about whether to proceed with covering Sophia and James's ceremony, given that their original contracts had been negotiated with me, and payment arrangements were structured around my event planning and financial obligations. Their questions about proceeding with alternative arrangements required immediate decisions about legal and financial responsibilities that I was unprepared to address while managing the emotional aftermath of betrayal. The wedding reception venue presented additional complications because catering arrangements, entertainment bookings, and decorative preparations had been completed according to specifications that I had provided throughout months of planning sessions. The possibility of transferring these arrangements to Sophia and James raised questions about financial responsibility and personal dignity that required resolution before their ceremony could proceed or alternative arrangements could be finalized. My emotional response began shifting from protective numbness toward anger as the full scope of practical complications became apparent. The systematic nature of the deception had created problems that extended far beyond personal hurt feelings to encompass financial obligations, social embarrassment, and professional complications that would require sustained effort to resolve effectively. The realization that my betrayers had been willing to create such extensive collateral damage revealed depths of selfishness that exceeded even the personal violations they had committed. The fourth significant challenge emerged through conversations with family members who needed explanations that preserved their dignity while attending social events where questions about the canceled wedding would inevitably arise. The story they would tell within their community networks needed to protect both my reputation and their own social standing, while avoiding details that might create additional gossip or speculation about factors that had contributed to the wedding cancellation. The legal implications of broken engagement contracts and wedding vendor agreements required immediate consultation with attorneys who specialized in family law and contract disputes. The financial investments that James and I had made jointly in wedding preparations created complicated questions about asset division and responsibility for outstanding obligations that could not be resolved through simple cancellation procedures. Jennifer's practical approach to immediate crisis management included developing action plans for addressing the most urgent concerns, while deferring less critical issues until emotional stability could be restored sufficiently to support complex decision-making. Her organizational skills proved invaluable in creating structured approaches to problems that felt overwhelming when considered simultaneously, but became manageable when addressed through systematic priority ranking. The interaction with James's family members revealed additional dimensions of the social complications created by the morning's revelations. Patricia Morrison's attempt to apologize for her son's behavior, while simultaneously expressing support for his right to choose genuine love over convenient partnership, created awkward conversations that required diplomatic responses, despite the personal pain their family's decisions had caused. The fifth major practical challenge involved managing my own living situation and immediate future plans that had been structured around assumptions about married life with James. The apartment lease that we had signed jointly, the shared financial accounts that supported our combined expenses, and the professional decisions I had made based on expectations about dual income and shared responsibilities, all required immediate reconsideration and potentially difficult modifications. The wedding dress itself became a symbol of the practical decisions that needed immediate resolution. The significant financial investment it represented could potentially be recovered through resale or rental arrangements, but the emotional associations would make any future use psychologically difficult. The decision about whether to preserve it as evidence of betrayal or dispose of it as part of moving forward represented broader questions about how to process the experience constructively. The guest management process revealed the social support network that remained available despite the dramatic changes in my personal circumstances. Several family members and close friends immediately offered practical assistance with immediate needs, while expressing genuine concern about my emotional well-being, rather than focusing primarily on their own inconvenience or embarrassment about the canceled celebration. The media attention that such unusual wedding circumstances might attract required consideration about privacy protection and reputation management strategies that could minimize additional stress while the immediate crisis was being resolved. The potential for social media speculation or local news coverage created additional pressure to manage public information carefully while addressing private emotional needs. The most profound aspect of this immediate aftermath period was the recognition that every assumption I had made about my future required complete reconsideration. The career decisions, living arrangements, financial planning, and personal goals that had been structured around expectations about married life with James were suddenly irrelevant and potentially counterproductive to whatever alternative future might emerge from the wreckage of my previous plans. Standing in the cathedral corridor 2 hours after discovering the betrayal, surrounded by the debris of canceled celebrations and facing a list of practical challenges that seemed impossible to resolve effectively, I began recognizing that the crisis had also created opportunities for authentic self-determination that had been absent while my life was structured around other people's expectations and limitations. The immediate aftermath of devastating betrayal had revealed both the extent of damage that had been inflicted and the resilience that existed within me to address complex challenges systematically and effectively. The practical skills that had enabled professional success were beginning to emerge as valuable tools for managing personal crisis and rebuilding life foundations according to priorities and values that reflected genuine self-knowledge rather than accommodation to others' expectations. The most important realization during this phase was that the immediate aftermath, while painful and complicated, represented the beginning of authentic independence and self-direction that had been impossible, while my identity and future were defined by relationships with people who had ultimately chosen to exploit rather than support my growth and happiness. The weeks following the cathedral revelation transformed my downtown Phoenix apartment into a fortress of isolation, where I retreated from professional obligations, social connections, and the fundamental routines that had previously structured my existence. The space that had once reflected my professional success and carefully curated lifestyle became a repository for the debris of canceled plans and abandoned dreams, where unopened sympathy cards accumulated beside untouched meals that concerned family members delivered with increasing frequency. The initial numbness that had protected me during the immediate crisis began dissolving into waves of emotional devastation that struck without warning throughout each day. Simple activities like checking email or answering telephone calls became overwhelming challenges that required energy reserves I no longer possessed. The professional competence that had defined my identity for years seemed to have evaporated, along with my ability to make decisions or maintain the organized approach to problem solving that had previously been my greatest strength. Morrison & Associates granted me extended leave when my attempts to return to work resulted in obvious inability to focus on client needs or contribute meaningfully to team projects. The compassionate response from colleagues who understood the unprecedented nature of my personal crisis provided temporary relief from financial concerns while simultaneously reinforcing my sense of professional failure and inadequacy. The leave of absence that was intended to provide recovery time instead became evidence of how completely the betrayal had undermined my capacity to function in environments that required emotional stability. The financial implications of the canceled wedding created mounting pressure that compounded the emotional devastation I was experiencing. Vendor contracts included cancellation clauses that required substantial penalty payments regardless of circumstances that made events impossible to complete as originally planned. The joint financial accounts that James and I had maintained were frozen, pending legal resolution of asset division, creating cash flow problems that made routine expense management increasingly difficult. Legal consultations with attorneys specializing in contract disputes and family law revealed the complex web of financial obligations that would require months to resolve satisfactorily. The prenuptial agreement that had seemed like practical protection for individual assets became another source of complications when determining responsibility for shared debts and joint investments that had been made in anticipation of married life. The legal processes moved with frustrating slowness, while immediate financial obligations demanded attention and resources that were becoming increasingly scarce. The social isolation that accompanied my withdrawal from professional and personal commitments created an echo chamber, where negative thoughts amplified without the moderating influence of external perspectives or routine activities that might have provided distraction from obsessive analysis of past relationship patterns. The apartment that had once hosted dinner parties and social gatherings became a place where silence dominated, except for the internal dialogue that constantly replayed conversations and events from recent months, searching for warning signs I had missed, or indications of when the deception had begun. Sleep patterns deteriorated as the mind that had previously focused on problem-solving and strategic planning became trapped in cycles of recrimination and futile attempts to understand how such systematic betrayal had occurred without detection. The professional skills that had enabled career advancement seemed irrelevant when applied to personal relationships that operated according to emotional rather than logical principles. The analytical approach that had been my greatest professional asset became a source of torture when applied to dissecting interactions that had been deliberately deceptive. The relationship with my family became strained, as their attempts to provide support and encouragement encountered my inability to accept comfort or engage constructively with suggestions for moving forward. Their expressions of love and concern felt overwhelming rather than helpful, because accepting their support required acknowledging that recovery was possible when I remained convinced that the damage was too extensive for meaningful repair. The cultural expectations within our Mexican-American community about resilience and family solidarity created additional pressure to demonstrate strength that I did not possess. My mother's daily visits became exercises in managing her anxiety while concealing the depth of my despair from someone whose own emotional well-being was threatened by witnessing her daughter's complete psychological collapse. Her offerings of traditional foods and suggestions for activities that had previously provided comfort during difficult periods felt like intrusions into a grief process that required solitude and internal focus, rather than external stimulation or social interaction. The physical symptoms of prolonged stress began manifesting through appetite loss, chronic fatigue, and difficulty concentrating that made even simple tasks like grocery shopping or maintaining apartment cleanliness feel insurmountable. The self-care routines that had previously been automatic aspects of daily life required conscious effort that exceeded available emotional resources. The professional appearance that had been crucial to career success became irrelevant when leaving the apartment felt like an overwhelming challenge. Jennifer's attempts to maintain our friendship through regular contact and offers of practical assistance encountered my growing inability to trust that her concern was genuine rather than obligatory or temporary. The betrayal by Sophia had contaminated my capacity to believe in female friendship, creating suspicion about motives that prevented acceptance of support that might have facilitated recovery. The isolation that had begun as protective withdrawal from potentially harmful social interaction became a prison that reinforced negative thought patterns, while preventing access to perspectives that might have challenged destructive assumptions. The professional identity that had anchored my sense of self-worth began crumbling, as extended absence from Morrison & Associates created concerns about career continuity and advancement prospects that had previously seemed secure. The leave of absence that was intended as temporary recovery time began feeling like evidence of professional inadequacy and inability to manage personal challenges without compromising work performance. The fear of being perceived as unstable or unreliable added career anxiety to the emotional devastation that already felt overwhelming. Social media became a source of additional pain as updates from former colleagues and acquaintances showcased lives that continued progressing normally, while mine had stagnated in crisis management and recovery attempts. The photographs of James and Sophia's honeymoon activities felt like deliberate provocations despite being standard social sharing that reflected their happiness rather than intentional cruelty toward me. The comparison between their apparent joy and my complete despair created cognitive distortions about fairness and justice that intensified feelings of victimization. The legal proceedings related to financial asset division progressed with bureaucratic slowness that created additional stress about future security and independence. Attorney fees accumulated while resolution remained distant, creating pressure to accept settlement terms that might not reflect fair distribution of assets and obligations. The financial planning that had previously provided security and confidence about future prospects became another source of anxiety as resources dwindled, while income remained suspended during extended leave. The apartment lease that James and I had signed jointly created practical complications about living arrangements that required resolution before lease renewal deadlines approached. The space that had once represented progress toward shared goals became a daily reminder of failed expectations and abandoned plans. The decision about whether to maintain the apartment independently or seek alternative housing arrangements required financial analysis and emotional energy that felt beyond current capabilities. The wedding dress remained in the bedroom closet as a symbol of devastation that I was unable to address through donation, sale, or disposal. The significant financial investment it represented felt like evidence of poor judgment and naive trust that had enabled exploitation by people who had understood my vulnerabilities better than I had understood their deceptions. The preservation of this painful reminder reflected broader patterns of inability to take decisive action about moving forward from the crisis. The darkest moments during this period occurred when the magnitude of necessary life reconstruction felt completely overwhelming relative to available internal resources and external support systems. The professional skills that had previously provided confidence about handling complex challenges seemed irrelevant to personal recovery that required emotional healing rather than strategic planning or analytical problem-solving. The future that had once seemed predictable and manageable appeared chaotic and threatening in ways that created paralysis rather than motivating action. Yet within this period of profound darkness, subtle changes were beginning to occur that would eventually contribute to transformation and growth that exceeded anything I had achieved during the comfortable years of my engagement. The forced solitude created space for honest self-examination that had been impossible, while maintaining relationships that required emotional accommodation and compromise of authentic preferences. The destruction of external validation sources was beginning to reveal internal strength and resilience that had been obscured by dependence on others, approval, and support. The financial challenges that initially felt overwhelming were gradually revealing practical capabilities and resourcefulness that had been dormant, while joint resources provided comfortable cushions against economic uncertainty. The legal complexities were forcing development of advocacy skills and detailed attention to contractual obligations that would prove valuable in future business contexts. The social isolation that had begun as withdrawal from potentially harmful interaction was creating opportunity for genuine self-knowledge and authentic priority identification. The descent into darkness that characterized this period represented necessary destruction of illusions and dependencies that had limited personal growth while providing temporary security and comfort. The pain that felt unbearable was actually clearing away obstacles to authentic self-development and empowerment that would eventually exceed anything possible within the constraints of relationships based on convenience, rather than genuine compatibility and mutual support. The knock on my apartment door at 3:47 p.m. on a Thursday afternoon interrupted the third consecutive day of what had become my standard routine, sitting in the same corner of the living room sofa, alternating between staring at unopened mail and scrolling through job listings that seemed to require qualifications I no longer possessed. The visitor was unexpected because my family had learned to call before arriving, and delivery services typically left packages without requiring personal interaction that I was increasingly unable to manage effectively. Standing outside my door was Elena Vasquez, the 62-year-old owner of Vasquez Events, the premier wedding planning company in Phoenix, whose services had been far beyond our budget during my engagement planning phase. Elena's presence made no immediate sense because we had never met personally, though I recognized her from local business publications and society page photographs that documented her work with prominent Arizona families and corporate celebrations. Elena's appearance was professional yet approachable, wearing a charcoal business suit that suggested competence while her expression conveyed warmth that indicated personal, rather than strictly business motivations for this unexpected visit. She carried a leather portfolio that implied official purposes, but her demeanor suggested genuine concern that extended beyond transactional relationships or professional obligations. Her opening statement was direct and surprising. She had learned about my wedding day circumstances through industry networks that connected vendors and service providers throughout the Phoenix metropolitan area. The story of a bride being replaced at her own wedding had circulated among event professionals as both cautionary tale and unprecedented crisis that highlighted vulnerabilities in traditional wedding planning approaches. Elena's interest had been sparked not by curiosity about scandalous gossip, but by professional recognition that such systematic deception revealed gaps in industry practices that needed addressing. Elena's research into my background had revealed my professional experience in marketing and client relationship management at Morrison & Associates, credentials that she found impressive and potentially valuable for her business operations. Her invitation to discuss potential collaboration opportunities seemed impossibly timed, given my current psychological state and extended leave from professional responsibilities. The suggestion that my recent crisis might actually qualify me for specialized expertise in her industry struck me as either misguided optimism or failure to understand the depth of damage I had sustained. The conversation that followed challenged every assumption I had developed about my professional future and personal recovery prospects during the preceding weeks of isolation and despair. Elena's perspective on my experience was fundamentally different from the sympathy and concern expressed by family members and friends who viewed the wedding day betrayal as personal tragedy requiring healing and eventual acceptance of losses that could never be fully recovered. Elena viewed my experience as inadvertent completion of comprehensive training in wedding industry vulnerabilities and client protection strategies that would be invaluable for developing innovative approaches to event planning and relationship counseling services. She explained that traditional wedding planning focused primarily on logistics, vendor coordination, and aesthetic execution, while providing minimal protection against the human relationship failures that could undermine even perfectly executed celebrations. Her business philosophy centered on providing clients with both beautiful celebrations and emotional security through comprehensive background research, relationship counseling integration, and crisis management protocols that could identify potential problems before they reached the point of public embarrassment or financial disaster. The wedding planning industry, according to Elena's analysis, had failed to evolve beyond aesthetic and logistical services to address the psychological and relationship dynamics that determined whether celebrations represented genuine joy or elaborate facades covering deeper problems. Elena's proposal was unprecedented in my experience with professional opportunities. She offered immediate employment as Director of Client Relations and Crisis Management, a newly created position that would combine my marketing expertise with hard-won experience in relationship betrayal recognition and recovery strategies. The salary she mentioned exceeded my previous income at Morrison & Associates, while providing opportunities for professional growth in an industry that was evolving beyond traditional event coordination toward comprehensive relationship and celebration consulting. The position would require developing protocols for identifying relationship vulnerabilities during initial client consultations, creating educational materials for couples who might be overlooking warning signs in their partnerships, and providing crisis management services for clients who experienced relationship complications during engagement or wedding planning processes. The role would transform my personal devastation into professional expertise that could prevent other people from experiencing similar betrayals while building innovative service offerings that would distinguish Vasquez Events from competitors. Elena's confidence in my qualifications for this role was based on professional assessment of skills demonstrated through my recovery efforts during recent weeks, rather than sympathy for my personal circumstances. She had researched my work at Morrison & Associates and conducted informal interviews with former colleagues who confirmed my analytical capabilities, client relationship management expertise, and problem-solving approaches that remained intact despite current emotional challenges. Her analysis of my apartment, which I had initially viewed as evidence of my inability to maintain basic life management, revealed systematic approaches to crisis management that impressed, rather than concerned her. The organized filing of legal documents, the detailed tracking of financial obligations, and the methodical approach to vendor communication demonstrated professional competence that had adapted effectively to personal crisis management, rather than deteriorating under pressure. Elena's own background provided credibility for her unconventional approach to business development and employee recruitment. She had built Vasquez Events from a small catering business into Phoenix's premier wedding planning company, through willingness to take risks on untested strategies and recognition that the most valuable employees often emerged from experiences that conventional hiring practices would view as disqualifications, rather than preparations for specialized expertise. Her personal story included her own experience with relationship betrayal 30 years earlier, when her first husband had abandoned their marriage for another woman while Elena was building the initial version of her catering business. The crisis had forced her to choose between personal collapse and professional growth that utilized the independence and determination that abandonment had required her to develop. Her decision to view betrayal as liberation rather than devastation had enabled business expansion and personal fulfillment that exceeded anything possible within the limitations of her previous marriage. The conversation revealed Elena's sophisticated understanding of the psychological dynamics that accompany major personal betrayals, and her conviction that recovery strategies that focus solely on emotional healing ignore opportunities for transformation that can emerge from the forced independence and authentic self-discovery that crisis situations create. Her approach to employee development included recognizing that people who have survived significant personal challenges often possess resilience, empathy, and problem-solving capabilities that cannot be taught through traditional training programs. Elena's offer included immediate start date flexibility that would accommodate my need for gradual re-engagement with professional responsibilities, while providing structure and purpose that could facilitate psychological recovery more effectively than continued isolation and focus on personal loss. The work environment at Vasquez Events emphasized collaboration and mutual support among team members who had been selected for their ability to understand and respond to client emotional needs rather than solely for technical event planning qualifications. The business model Elena described represented innovation in wedding industry services that addressed evolving client expectations about relationship support and crisis prevention, rather than simply aesthetic coordination and logistical management. Modern couples were seeking wedding planners who could provide psychological insight and relationship guidance, in addition to vendor management and design consultation, creating market opportunities for professionals who combine traditional event planning skills with counseling and crisis management expertise. My initial resistance to Elena's proposal reflected both psychological protection against additional disappointment and genuine uncertainty about my capacity to manage professional responsibilities that would require emotional stability and interpersonal competence that I was not certain I possessed. The prospect of working directly with couples during their engagement periods felt overwhelming given my recent experience with relationship deception and the trust issues that had developed as a result of systematic betrayal by people I had considered closest to me. Elena's response to my concerns demonstrated the same strategic thinking that had built her business success, and her understanding that employee development required addressing psychological barriers rather than simply providing job descriptions and performance expectations. She proposed a gradual integration process that would begin with administrative and research responsibilities that utilized my analytical strengths, while allowing time for emotional recovery and confidence rebuilding before advancing to direct client interaction and crisis management duties. The position would also include professional development opportunities that would expand my qualifications beyond marketing into relationship counseling, conflict resolution, and crisis management specializations that would enhance career prospects regardless of whether my future remained with Vasquez Events or led to independent consulting or other professional directions. Elena's investment in employee growth reflected business strategy that viewed staff development as competitive advantage rather than expense. The financial security that immediate employment would provide addressed practical concerns that had been contributing to psychological stress and decision-making paralysis during recent weeks. The salary and benefits package would resolve cash flow problems while legal proceedings related to asset division continued their slow progression toward resolution. The professional structure would provide routine and purpose that could serve as foundation for broader life reconstruction efforts. Elena's final argument for accepting her offer focused on the opportunity to transform personal devastation into professional mission that could prevent other people from experiencing similar betrayals while building expertise and reputation in an expanding market for comprehensive relationship and celebration services. The position would channel analytical skills and hard-won experience into meaningful work that addressed genuine societal needs rather than simply providing income and professional advancement. The meeting concluded with Elena leaving detailed written materials about the position, company culture, and professional development opportunities, while emphasizing that decision timeline would accommodate my need for careful consideration without pressure for immediate commitment. Her approach respected both my current emotional fragility and my professional capabilities in ways that demonstrated sophisticated understanding of recovery processes and employee motivation strategies. Standing in my apartment after Elena's departure, surrounded by the same evidence of personal crisis that had seemed overwhelming hours earlier, I began recognizing possibilities for transformation that extended far beyond simply recovering from betrayal, toward building professional expertise and personal purpose that could exceed anything I had achieved during the comfortable years of my previous relationship and career trajectory. The morning I walked into Vasquez Events for my first day as Director of Client Relations and Crisis Management marked the beginning of a psychological transformation that would challenge every assumption I had developed about my capabilities, professional identity, and capacity for recovering from devastating personal betrayal. The sleek office space in Old Town Scottsdale represented more than simply a new work environment. It symbolized the possibility that my recent experience could become the foundation for expertise and success that exceeded anything I had achieved during the comfortable years of my previous career. Elena's office reflected the sophisticated aesthetic and attention to detail that had built her reputation among Phoenix's most discerning clients. The space combined professional elegance with personal warmth through carefully curated artwork, comfortable seating arrangements, and technological infrastructure that supported both creative design work and complex project management. The environment suggested competence and reliability, while maintaining accessibility that would encourage client trust and open communication about sensitive personal matters. The team Elena had assembled at Vasquez Events represented diverse backgrounds and specialized skills that complemented rather than duplicated each other's capabilities. Maria Santos managed vendor relationships and logistics coordination with the precision of a military operations specialist. David Chen handled design consultation and aesthetic coordination with artistic sensibility, combined with practical understanding of budget constraints and implementation challenges. Sarah Williams managed financial planning and contract negotiation with attention to detail that protected both client interests and company profitability. My integration into this established team required developing collaborative relationships while contributing specialized expertise that would enhance overall service offerings without disrupting existing workflows or client relationships. Elena's approach to team development emphasized individual strengths while encouraging cross-training that would enable flexible response to varying client needs and project complexities. The environment supported professional growth through challenging assignments and ongoing education rather than rigid adherence to narrowly defined job descriptions. The first client consultation I observed revealed the sophisticated approach to relationship assessment that Elena had developed through decades of experience, with couples whose surface compatibility often masked deeper incompatibilities or communication problems that threatened successful long-term partnerships. Her questioning techniques explored not only logistical preferences about celebration details, but also fundamental values, conflict resolution approaches, and mutual support systems that would determine relationship sustainability beyond the wedding celebration itself. Elena's methodology included subtle indicators that could reveal potential problems months before they reached crisis proportions. Couples who demonstrated genuine mutual respect and communication skills during wedding planning sessions typically translated those capabilities into successful problem-solving approaches throughout marriage. Partners who exhibited controlling behaviors, financial secrecy, or inability to compromise during celebration planning often revealed patterns that would create more serious difficulties when facing major life decisions or unexpected challenges. The client files Elena shared with me documented numerous cases where early intervention during wedding planning had prevented expensive celebrations that would have celebrated relationships destined for failure within the first year of marriage. Her approach balanced respect for client autonomy with professional responsibility to provide honest assessment of relationship dynamics that might benefit from counseling or deeper examination before proceeding with marriage commitments. My role in this process would involve developing systematic protocols for relationship assessment that could identify vulnerability patterns while providing resources and referrals that might address problems before they reach the point of public embarrassment or financial disaster. The position represented opportunity to channel my analytical skills and hard-won experience with relationship deception into meaningful work that could prevent other people from experiencing similar betrayals. The first project Elena assigned involved researching industry practices for background verification and reference checking that could provide additional protection for clients who might be vulnerable to partners with histories of financial irresponsibility, relationship infidelity, or other behaviors that could threaten marriage stability. Traditional wedding planning services focused primarily on celebration logistics, while providing minimal investigation or protection against human relationship failures that could undermine even perfectly executed events. The research revealed surprising gaps in industry standards for client protection and relationship assessment that created opportunities for innovative service development. Most wedding planners provided vendor coordination and aesthetic consultation without addressing the psychological and relational dynamics that determined whether celebrations represented genuine joy or elaborate facades covering deeper problems. The market potential for comprehensive relationship and celebration consulting services exceeded Elena's initial projections. My background in marketing and client relationship management proved immediately valuable for analyzing competitive positioning and developing service descriptions that would communicate complex value propositions to potential clients without overwhelming them with psychological jargon or creating anxiety about relationship assessment processes. The challenge involved presenting relationship evaluation as enhancement to celebration planning rather than obstacle to romantic happiness or source of unwanted scrutiny. The financial analysis I conducted revealed that comprehensive relationship consulting services could command premium pricing while providing clients with substantial value through prevention of expensive celebrations for relationships likely to fail and early identification of problems that might be addressed through counseling or communication improvement strategies. The business model represented significant expansion of traditional wedding planning into adjacent markets with higher profit margins and greater client satisfaction potential, Elena's response to my initial project results demonstrated confidence in my analytical capabilities and strategic thinking that had been absent from my professional identity during recent weeks of isolation and self-doubt. Her recognition of expertise I had developed through personal crisis validated the possibility that devastating experiences could become sources of valuable knowledge rather than simply obstacles to overcome or minimize through recovery processes. The second major project involved developing educational materials for couples who might benefit from relationship strengthening exercises during engagement periods. The materials would address communication techniques, conflict resolution strategies, and financial planning approaches that could prevent many of the problems that led to wedding day crises or early marriage failures. The project utilized both my marketing experience and personal insights into relationship vulnerability patterns. The research and development process required interviewing relationship counselors, family lawyers, and financial advisors who worked regularly with couples experiencing difficulties that might have been prevented through better preparation during engagement periods. The professional network Elena had developed provided access to experts whose insights would enhance service offerings while establishing referral relationships that would benefit both client outcomes and business development objectives. The client feedback we gathered about existing wedding planning services revealed significant dissatisfaction with industry approaches that focused primarily on aesthetic coordination without addressing relationship dynamics or providing resources for couples who encountered difficulties during planning processes. Clients expressed willingness to invest in more comprehensive services that would provide both beautiful celebrations and confidence in relationship foundations. My personal experience with relationship betrayal provided unique perspective on client vulnerability patterns that complemented Elena's decades of professional observation. The combination of analytical training, marketing expertise, and hard-won experience with deception recognition created qualifications that could not be replicated through traditional education or training programs. The specialized knowledge represented competitive advantage that could differentiate Vasquez Events from competitors while providing genuine value to clients. The psychological benefits of engaging in meaningful work that utilized my professional skills while addressing personal experience became apparent within weeks of beginning the position. The sense of purpose that emerged from preventing other people from experiencing similar betrayals provided motivation and energy that had been absent during months of recovery-focused isolation. The professional identity that had been damaged through extended leave from Morrison & Associates was being rebuilt through challenging projects that demonstrated capability and expertise. Elena's mentorship approach emphasized learning through practical application rather than theoretical discussion, providing opportunities to develop crisis management and relationship counseling skills through direct involvement with client situations, while maintaining appropriate boundaries and referring complex psychological issues to licensed professionals. The training process built confidence through successful problem-solving experiences, rather than classroom-style education that might not translate effectively to real-world client needs. The networking opportunities that accompanied the position included connections with professionals throughout the wedding and event planning industry, relationship counseling community, and business development sector that could support both immediate job responsibilities and longer-term career advancement. Elena's reputation and industry relationships provided access to learning and growth opportunities that would enhance qualifications, regardless of whether my future remained with Vasquez Events or led to independent consulting or other professional directions. The financial security that steady employment provided addressed practical concerns that had been contributing to psychological stress during recent months, while enabling focus on professional development and skill building rather than survival-oriented crisis management. The salary and benefits package supported both immediate living expenses and longer-term planning for independence and security that had been threatened by legal proceedings related to asset division from my canceled engagement. The most significant psychological development during this period was recognition that the devastating betrayal I had experienced was beginning to transform from source of shame and failure into foundation for expertise and professional mission that could serve others, while building reputation and capabilities that exceeded anything I had achieved during my previous career trajectory. The possibility of success that utilized rather than ignored my recent trauma represented fundamental shift in perspective about recovery and future prospects. The work environment at Vasquez Events provided both structure and flexibility that supported continued psychological healing, while engaging professional capabilities that had remained intact despite emotional devastation. The combination of challenging projects, supportive colleagues, and meaningful mission created conditions for growth that addressed both practical needs and emotional recovery requirements more effectively than therapy or isolation-focused healing approaches had achieved. Standing in Elena's office 6 weeks after beginning the position, reviewing successful outcomes from client consultations that had utilized protocols I had developed, I experienced the first genuine confidence about future prospects that I had felt since the cathedral revelation. The glimmer of possibility that Elena had recognized during my darkest period was becoming measurable achievement that validated her unconventional hiring decision while demonstrating capabilities I had not known I possessed. The pivotal moment arrived on a crisp December morning when I received notification that the legal proceedings related to my canceled engagement had been finalized, officially closing the last remaining connection to my former life with James Morrison. The documentation confirmed asset division that favored my interests, vendor obligation resolution that minimized my financial liability, and legal protection against further claims related to our terminated relationship. The formal conclusion of legal entanglements represented more than administrative resolution. It symbolized complete freedom to determine my future without constraints imposed by past relationships or obligations. Standing in Elena's office that morning, reviewing financial statements that confirmed my enhanced economic position and professional contracts that detailed expanding responsibilities at Vasquez Events, I faced a decision that would determine whether I continued growing within the security of established employment or pursued the entrepreneurial opportunity that had been developing through months of successful client work and innovative service development. The client base I had cultivated through relationship assessment and crisis management services had expanded beyond Elena's initial projections, creating demand that exceeded Vasquez Events, capacity to serve while maintaining quality standards, and personalized attention that distinguished our services from conventional wedding planning approaches. The waiting list for comprehensive relationship consulting had reached 6 months, with clients expressing willingness to pay premium rates for specialized expertise that could prevent costly celebration investments in relationships likely to fail. Elena's recognition of my contribution to company growth had resulted in profit-sharing arrangements and expanded decision-making authority that provided both financial rewards and professional autonomy within the established business structure. The position offered security, continued learning opportunities, and partnership potential that could lead to eventual co-ownership of Vasquez Events. The conventional career advancement path promised stability and incremental growth, without requiring the risks associated with independent entrepreneurship. The alternative possibility that had been crystallizing through months of professional success involved establishing an independent consulting practice that would focus exclusively on relationship assessment, crisis prevention, and comprehensive premarital counseling services. The specialized expertise I had developed through personal experience and professional application represented unique qualifications that could command premium pricing while serving clients whose needs exceeded traditional wedding planning services. Market research I had conducted during recent weeks revealed substantial demand for relationship consulting services that addressed vulnerabilities before they reached crisis proportions. The target market included successful professionals who recognized the value of expert assessment before making major life commitments, individuals who had experienced previous relationship failures and sought protection against repeating destructive patterns, and couples who preferred comprehensive evaluation over conventional premarital counseling approaches. The financial analysis supporting independent practice indicated revenue potential that exceeded my current compensation while providing greater control over service delivery, client selection, and professional development directions. The business model would require initial investment in office space, professional liability insurance, and marketing initiatives, but the capital requirements remained manageable given my improved financial position following legal settlement resolution. The psychological considerations involved in choosing independent entrepreneurship over continued employment represented more significant factors than financial calculations or market analysis. Establishing my own practice would require complete confidence in capabilities that had been developed through personal crisis and professional challenge, rather than traditional education or training programs. The decision demanded faith and expertise that had emerged from devastating betrayal, rather than conventional qualifications that provided external validation. Elena's response to my exploration of independent practice options reflected genuine mentorship, rather than self-interested attempts to retain valuable employees. Her analysis of my readiness for entrepreneurship emphasized both strengths that qualified me for independent success and development areas that might benefit from continued experience within established business structures. Her perspective balanced realistic assessment of challenges with recognition of capabilities that had exceeded initial expectations. The conversation revealed Elena's own entrepreneurial journey, including decisions she had made during critical development phases that had either accelerated or delayed progress toward business objectives she had established during earlier career transitions. Her insights about timing, resource management, and client relationship development provided practical guidance that complemented theoretical knowledge I had acquired through research and observation. The most compelling argument for pursuing independent practice involved the opportunity to develop specialized services that would address gaps in existing market offerings while building professional reputation based on demonstrable expertise rather than association with established organizations. The independent approach would enable innovation and service customization that might be constrained within existing business structures, regardless of their quality or reputation. The decision-making process required honest assessment of personal motivations that might influence professional judgment about optimal career directions. The desire for complete autonomy and control represented both strength that could drive entrepreneurial success and potential weakness that might create unrealistic expectations about independence from collaboration, market constraints, and client demands that no business owner could avoid entirely. The networking relationships I had developed through Vasquez events provided foundation for independent practice that would not have been available without Elena's mentorship and industry connections. The referral sources, vendor relationships, and professional credibility that had been established through association with respected organization would transfer to independent practice, while providing competitive advantages that newly established consultants typically required years to develop. The specialized nature of relationship assessment and crisis prevention services offered protection against direct competition from traditional wedding planners who lacked psychological training or personal experience with relationship betrayal. The unique qualifications I possessed created market positioning that would be difficult for competitors to replicate, providing sustainable competitive advantage that could support long-term business growth. The ethical considerations involved in utilizing personal trauma as professional qualification required careful attention to boundaries between therapeutic services that required licensed credentials and consulting services that provided education, assessment, and referral coordination. The legal and professional standards governing relationship counseling demanded clear understanding of scope limitations and appropriate collaboration with licensed mental health professionals. The technology infrastructure required for independent practice included client management systems, secure communication platforms, and assessment tools that would support sophisticated service delivery while protecting confidential information according to professional standards and legal requirements. The investment in professional systems represented both startup cost and competitive advantage that would enable service quality that justified premium pricing. Elena's final recommendation involved phased transition that would minimize risk while maximizing preparation for independent success. The proposed approach included gradual reduction of responsibilities at Vasquez events while developing independent client base, establishing business systems, and securing professional credentials that would enhance credibility and service delivery capabilities. The decision crystallized during weekend reflection about personal values and professional objectives that had evolved through recovery from betrayal and development of expertise that transformed devastating experience into valuable knowledge. The opportunity to prevent other people from experiencing similar relationship failures while building financial independence and professional reputation represented alignment between personal mission and business opportunity that justified entrepreneurial risks. The psychological transformation that had occurred during months of recovery and professional development had replaced victim identity with expert authority, dependency on external validation with confidence in demonstrated capabilities, and reactive approach to circumstances with proactive strategies for creating preferred outcomes. The internal changes that accompanied external success provided foundation for independent decision-making that reflected authentic priorities rather than accommodation to others' expectations. The morning I submitted formal resignation notice to Elena, accompanied by transition plan that would ensure continuity of client services and preservation of business relationships, marked the definitive commitment to entrepreneurial independence that would test every capability I had developed through personal crisis and professional challenge. The decision represented more than career change. It embodied complete acceptance of responsibility for creating the future I desired, rather than accepting whatever opportunities others might provide. The business plan I had developed during decision-making process outlined service offerings that would address relationship vulnerability assessment, crisis prevention education, and comprehensive premarital consulting that exceeded conventional counseling approaches. The target market analysis confirmed sufficient demand for specialized services while pricing research validated revenue projections that would support both business growth and personal financial objectives. The office space I had identified in downtown Scottsdale provided professional environment that would communicate competence and confidentiality, while remaining accessible to target clientele who valued convenience and discretionary service delivery. The location represented both practical consideration for business operations and symbolic statement about professional status that would influence client perceptions and referral generation. Standing in that empty office space 3 weeks after submitting resignation notice, surrounded by boxes containing professional resources and business equipment that would support independent practice, I experienced complete commitment to transformation that had begun with devastating betrayal and evolved through professional development into entrepreneurial opportunity that exceeded anything possible within the limitations of my previous comfortable existence. The transformation of my empty Scottsdale office space into a professional consulting practice required meticulous attention to details that would communicate competence, confidentiality, and sophisticated understanding of relationship dynamics to clients whose vulnerability would demand the highest standards of professional presentation. Each decision regarding furniture selection, technology integration, and environmental design reflected strategic thinking about client psychology and business positioning that had evolved far beyond the basic marketing concepts I had applied during my previous career at Morrison & Associates. The reception area was configured to balance professionalism with approachability through neutral color palettes that would appeal to diverse aesthetic preferences, while avoiding associations with traditional medical or therapeutic environments that might create anxiety among clients seeking relationship consultation rather than psychological treatment. The seating arrangements provided both privacy for sensitive conversations and visual lines that would enable discreet observation of client interactions during couple consultations. The consultation room itself incorporated elements designed to facilitate honest communication while maintaining appropriate boundaries between professional services and personal counseling that required licensed credentials. The space included comfortable seating that encouraged relaxation without compromising professional authority, technology that would support assessment presentations without creating clinical atmosphere, and privacy features that would protect confidential discussions from inadvertent disclosure. The business systems I established during the initial weeks of operation reflected comprehensive understanding of client relationship management that extended beyond simple appointment scheduling to include detailed documentation protocols, secure communication platforms, and follow-up procedures that would ensure continuity of service while protecting sensitive personal information according to professional standards and legal requirements. The assessment protocols I had developed represented synthesis of academic research in relationship psychology, practical insights gained through professional experience at Vasquez events, and personal understanding of vulnerability patterns that had emerged from my own experience with systematic deception. The combination created evaluation tools that could identify potential relationship problems with accuracy that exceeded conventional premarital counseling approaches, while remaining accessible to clients who might resist traditional therapeutic interventions. The first client who responded to my initial marketing efforts was Rebecca Thompson, a successful corporate attorney whose previous marriage had ended through discovery of her husband's extensive financial deception and emotional infidelity. Her inquiry about relationship assessment services reflected sophisticated understanding of vulnerability patterns combined with determination to avoid repeating destructive choices that had compromised both personal happiness and professional reputation during her previous relationship crisis. Rebecca's consultation revealed the target market sophistication I had anticipated during business planning development. Her questions about assessment methodologies, confidentiality protections, and service outcomes demonstrated intellectual approach to relationship decision-making that distinguished her from clients who might seek emotional support or validation rather than analytical evaluation of partnership compatibility and risk factors. The assessment process I conducted with Rebecca and her current partner Michael Davis utilized structured interview techniques that explored communication patterns, conflict resolution approaches, financial management philosophies, and long-term goal compatibility while observing behavioral indicators that might suggest deception, manipulation, or fundamental incompatibility that could threaten relationship stability regardless of surface attraction or shared interests. The comprehensive evaluation revealed strong foundation elements, including mutual respect, compatible values regarding career and family priorities, and effective communication skills that suggested high probability of successful long-term partnership. However, the assessment also identified areas requiring attention, including different approaches to financial risk management and varying expectations about extended family involvement in major decisions that could create conflicts, if not addressed through deliberate discussion and agreement development. The final report I prepared for Rebecca and Michael provided detailed analysis of relationship strengths, potential vulnerability areas, and specific recommendations for addressing identified concerns through targeted communication exercises, professional financial planning consultation, and family boundary discussions that could prevent minor differences from escalating into major conflicts during marriage transition or subsequent life challenges. Rebecca's response to the comprehensive assessment exceeded my expectations for client satisfaction and validation of service value. Her feedback emphasized appreciation for analytical approach that respected their intelligence while providing practical guidance based on professional expertise, rather than generic relationship advice that might be obtained through conventional counseling or self-help resources. The referrals Rebecca provided to professional colleagues who had expressed interest in relationship assessment services created immediate business growth that validated market demand projections, while demonstrating the networking effects that could accelerate practice development among target clientele, who valued discretion and professional competence over conventional marketing approaches. The second major client engagement involved consultation with Jennifer and Robert Martinez, a couple whose relationship had developed through professional collaboration, but included concerns about whether workplace compatibility would translate effectively to marriage partnership, given different backgrounds, family expectations, and long-term career aspirations that might create competing priorities during critical decision-making periods. The assessment process with Jennifer and Robert revealed more complex dynamics that required multiple consultation sessions to explore fully. Their professional collaboration had created intimate working relationship that included many partnership skills, but had not addressed personal compatibility factors that would determine success in managing household decisions, family planning choices, and individual growth needs that extended beyond shared career interests. The evaluation identified significant strengths, including complementary professional skills, shared intellectual interests, and mutual respect for individual achievements and aspirations. However, the assessment also revealed important areas requiring development, including different approaches to family involvement in personal decisions, varying expectations about geographic mobility for career advancement, and distinct preferences regarding social interaction and private time management that could create ongoing tension without deliberate accommodation strategies. The consultation process extended over 6 weeks to allow time for Jennifer and Robert to implement recommended communication exercises while observing their responses to relationship challenges that arose during normal life circumstances. The extended evaluation provided opportunity to assess their adaptability and commitment to relationship improvement, rather than relying solely on single-session interview responses that might not reflect typical behavioral patterns. The comprehensive assessment confirmed their fundamental compatibility, while identifying specific areas where professional mediation could facilitate discussions that might otherwise create persistent disagreements or unresolved tensions. The recommendations included structured approaches to decision-making about career priorities, family involvement boundaries, and lifestyle preferences that would honor both individual needs and partnership requirements. The success of both initial client engagements validated the business model while providing case studies that could be utilized in marketing materials and professional presentations to expand service awareness among target audiences. The detailed documentation of assessment processes and outcomes created intellectual property that could support future business development, including training programs, published materials, and professional consultation services for other practitioners seeking to develop similar expertise. The financial performance during the first quarter of operation exceeded projections through combination of premium pricing that reflected specialized expertise and efficiency gains that enabled service delivery to multiple clients without compromising quality or attention to individual needs. The revenue growth supported both business expansion and personal financial security, while validating professional positioning that distinguished relationship assessment services from conventional wedding planning or marriage counseling alternatives. The professional recognition I received through early client success included referrals from family law attorneys, financial planners, and mental health professionals who recognize the value of comprehensive relationship evaluation in preventing expensive divorces, custody disputes, and financial complications that could result from marriages based on inadequate compatibility assessment or unrealistic expectations about partnership dynamics. The networking opportunities that accompanied business development included membership in professional organizations focused on family law, relationship counseling, and business consulting that provided continuing education opportunities while establishing credibility within professional communities that could generate referrals and collaborative partnerships. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us. Their cognitive dissonance had created vulnerabilities that her strategic planning had converted into unprecedented opportunities for professional advancement and industry influence. Victoria Chen walked out of Meridian Pharmaceuticals carrying documentation that would soon establish her as a pioneering example of how experienced professionals could build strategic protection against age-based discrimination, while creating independent business empires that exceeded the scope and influence of traditional corporate employment relationships. Her transformation from vulnerable employee to empowered entrepreneur was just beginning to unfold. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.